Welcome to the Possibility Action Network podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Middleton, aka Possibilityman. We are committed to bringing you guests who strive to better people's lives and serve as a force for good in the world. Our guest today is Eric Paul Meredith. He is a credentialed chef. I like to say that he's not just a cook, he is a registered dietitian, and he is a human nutrition advocate. He is the creator of a comic series called Health Heroes. Eric Paul, welcome to the show today.
Thank you for having me, Stephen.
Good. Look, I'm looking forward to our conversation, but first, this programming note to all of those who are listening or watching this podcast, wherever you find it, your support matters. Like us, share us, follow us, and tell your friends about the Possibility Action Network podcast. Our sponsor information is below where the description, wherever you find this podcast. Eric, I'm so happy to be with you today, sir.
Thank you once again for having
Now,
me.
look, firstly, in studying you, I think I came across a fact that I caught the very last minute of my research, that you are a veteran of the U.S. Navy. Did I get that right?
Yes. I've served in the Navy from 87 to 92. I was a Russian linguist, and my last tour of duty actually rode submarine. So I like to say I have a lot in common with Denzel outside of his looks. We both were on a submarine and playing war games against Soviet adversaries. So, yeah.
Do you still speak Russian?
So it's one of those things. I went to language school in 1988, so quite some time ago. If you don't use it, you kind of lose it. So I can say
Yeah.
some phrases, my name, my age, and this, that, and the other. And I can say a little bit. I can understand a little bit of it as well. But it's going on quite some time since I had to use it in conversational terms. Yep.
Yeah, I was just listening to someone this morning speaking in Russian,
Okay.
and listen, the only Russian that I figured, Espadanya.
Yep. That's goodbye. Yep.
Yeah, yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So, hey, Eric, I wanted to talk to you because I know that you are into, I'm going to use the broadest label that I can find, that I can think of,
Okay.
human nutrition. What is
Yep.
that to you, human nutrition?
So all living animals have some form of nutrition. Even plants, they use photosynthesis to create food. Animals, of course, outside of humans, have their nutrition as well. Some are herbivores, some are carnivores, some are omnivores. They eat both. Like humans, of course, we eat both plants and animals. And
Mhm.
so I focus on the human aspect. Of course, someone like a veterinarian would understand, of course, animal nutrition. And
Mhm.
so I focus on that component, understanding the human anatomy, physiology. Two things are different, and how nutrition works for the human construct.
Got you. Well, I'm glad you mentioned that. So, in human nutrition, I'm going to ask you this question right out of the gate. Do human beings need to eat animal products? Do we need it?
No, you do not. You do not need animal products to to survive. You do
Uh,
need things like water.
mhm,
You can get, the majority of the macronutrients,
mhm,
carbohydrates, proteins, and fats from plants, and then micronutrients. There's a few micronutrients which are a little bit harder to get if you're completely plant-based, and some of those are like your B vitamins, like
mhm,
B12
well,
and
mhm.
so forth. But what people do is they either supplement, or you might get a product like nutritional yeast to be able to get like B12. But
Yeah.
no, so there are plenty of people who do very well on plant-based nutrition. Of course, there are a lot of famous athletes who are plant-based. The Williams sisters, for example,
Right.
Colin Kaepernick, Chris Paul. You can go down the line. People who were,
Yeah.
elite in their performance and their needs. So no, you do not have to consume animal products to survive.
Yeah, I just heard about a professional athlete, in fact, a National Football League player. His name
Hmm.
escapes me, so I'm not going to mention it. But he's plant based. I think he could be a
Yep.
quarterback. I says, "Whoa, this guy's plant based." So let me ask you that. I've heard people who talk about the need to eat animal products, and the thing that they cite is protein. What's your take on that?
So yeah, I can see how that's what the the traditional marketing that they get is like, animals are created, equated with protein. So there are a lot of plant-based sources. You look at people like gorillas and elephants, some of the largest, most powerful, beings on the planet, and they consume a plant-based diet. So you can get plant-based sources of protein, believe it or not, grains. If you look at the nutrition label on a piece of bread, you will see protein. I mean, about 5 grams of protein come from bread and whole grains. So whole grains have protein. Beans, legumes,
Yeah.
nuts, all of those things have protein in them. So you do not need to eat animal products just to get good sources of protein. Matter of
Right.
fact, they recommend, most cardiologists, even the American Heart Association recommends that you consume a significant portion of your protein from plant-based sources, just because there are a lot of things that go into animal proteins. Like there's a lot of saturated fat,
Yeah.
and of course, depending on how you're sourcing your particular things, it might be hormones, antibiotics, and other things that are associated with the production of those animal-based products.
That's right. I mean, the way animals are raised today,
Right.
sometimes it's as if they not only cows and
Hmm.
hogs, but even fish is like chicken. It's like they
Right.
they grow those things. And I'm exaggerating now,
Yep.
but it's like they can grow those things like overnight and make them big and fat.
Yep.
And to do that, they must have been pumped with something that could be harmful for us, to us.
Yeah. Well, so you mentioned something like farm-raised fish versus wild caught.
Mhm.
My preference is wild caught. That's in the nature. They're swimming around. They're building their muscles. They eating from the natural habitat. Where farm raised is, they're not going anywhere. You're feeding them pellets of food that is making them bigger and making them mature a lot quicker. Same thing with chickens. When I was growing up, my grandparents had a farm. They roamed the free range. They
Uh,
ate grass and natural, feed, and they weren't just given corn or steroids or anything like that to make them bigger, quicker. I think the average chicken probably used to mature in 2.5 years. Now I
mhm.
think it's like 6 months.
Wow.
So yeah.
Wow. Yeah, and I tell you what, if you really think about it from a conscience, standpoint,
Yep.
some of these chickens are actually they spent their entire life. And correct me if I'm wrong, but they can spend their entire life in a cage
Yes.
and
Yep.
never roam around.
Yep. So if you look at, your eggs or your chicken product, you're going to either see cage free or you might not see cage free. And,
Mhm.
once again, it's one of those things. If they're in a cage, the environment might not be the cleanest, the most hygienic. And then secondly, if disease spreads, they're in close proximity to each other, where, if you if you're in the elements or out free roaming, you have a less propensity to be able to catch that particular whatever's going around, a virus, a bug. And animals do get sick. Humans
Sure.
definitely get sick.
Yeah.
And so, I don't think any human would sign up to eat a sick animal.
Mhm.
But some animals do get sick. So
Yeah. And I'm going to broaden this again. I want you to think about, I'm going to call it lifestyle nutrition.
okay.
Lifestyle, there is something to that, isn't it? That nutrition becomes a person's lifestyle.
Yeah. So you bring up a good point. So I tell people, the concept of dieting, people say, I'm going to a wedding or I need to compete in a race, and they go on a diet. And so a diet is not meant to be a bad word. A diet just means a way of eating. And so it should be more lifestyle. So a lot of people try to change, they're trying to lose 20, 30 pounds over 2 or 3 months, which is not realistic. Usually a realistic goal is about 1.5 pounds a week if you're
Yeah.
reducing calories or working out. And of course, most of us can't afford to be on the Marvel superhero diet,
Yeah.
in which we have a trainer. We're doing 2 a days, working out twice a day, working out 2 or 3 hours intensely, and you have a personal chef and dietitian cooking your meals. Most people don't have those type of resources or know-how. So when you talk about lifestyle, you want to set yourself up to be able to understand how nutrition works, and especially for your body, and make those adjustments, for lifestyle. For example, nothing against burgers or fried products or fast food. Those things have a place in the diet. You can eat those once in a while, but they should not be 80% of your diet. If they are, you're really potentially jeopardizing your lifespan, much like people who overconsume cigarettes, alcohol, or in toxic environments. Food can be that detrimental as well. So, clogging the arteries, raising the blood pressure, possibility of stroke, gaining excess weight, causing too much stress on your bones, uh, developing respiratory problems. So these are all the things. I think they say about 70% of disease can be prevented with proper nutrition and, of course, sleep, exercise, and so forth. But people overlook nutrition. That's something you're putting in your body all the time. And so the quality that you put in your body is going to be the quality that your body is able to perform at. And
Yeah.
so, yeah,
Mhm.
so definitely want to make lifestyle choices, sugar sweetened beverages, things high in fat, things that high in sodium. You
Mhm.
want to definitely make sure you're mindful of consuming those. Once again, they do
Mhm.
have a place in the diet. Nothing wrong with a donut or a bagel every now and then, or French fries or potato chips. But once again, you wanna be eating healthy for lifestyles. So I have an 80-20 rule. At
Okay.
least 80% of the time you should be eating clean, lots of fruits and vegetables, whole grains, lean protein. Watch your fat. You should only be doing about 30% of your calories of fat. And there's healthy fats like olive oil, avocados, nuts, and seeds. And then 10% of those calories can come from saturated fat. That's the fat that is solid at room temperature. Like if you look at like the fat on a steak, and but way back when we used to have Crisco, which was solid at room temperature. So any in coconut oil, of course, is solid at room temperature. So that's a saturated fat. It's one of the healthier saturated fats, but it's still saturated fat nonetheless.
Yeah, I mean, it's so important. When I think about lifestyle nutrition, I like to wrap it around self-determination theory, where, if you
Okay.
look at the elements, it's like authority. You have this authority to make some changes.
Right.
The second element, though, and this is what you're touching on now, is education or competence.
Right.
You got to learn about, what's best and that kind of thing. But you also mentioned chronic diseases, and this gives me a chance to poke around here a little bit as well.
Well,
I have been to the Center for Disease Control's website, the CDC,
right.
a few different occasions to look up chronic conditions.
Right.
And they said exactly what you've just said, that many chronic conditions can be ameliorated or even reversed by just simply making some changes in one's kitchen.
Yep.
Uh, and that's important. So when you think of chronic diseases, what are some of the major ones, Eric, that comes to your mind?
Oh yeah. So the top ones, and I actually did this last week for the company I work for. So the top ones are heart disease. Heart
Okay.
disease, and in that you might hypertension is technically high blood pressure, but it can usually lead to heart disease because you're making your heart work a lot harder. So hypertension, high blood pressure, um, that's a part of of heart disease. Stroke, which is an event that happens, which is a consequence of heart disease and high blood pressure. What they call AFib, atrial fibrillation, irregular heartbeats and so forth. Um, and then high cholesterol. So all of those things are really go into heart disease. And so a lot of those are, some can be genetic and some could be, the way your cardiovascular system is set up from birth, but a lot of it is really due to diet. The next one, especially for African Americans, people who identify as Black, is diabetes, and diabetes, of course, most often leads to kidney disease. And so, one of the biggest causes of amputation is not from having an accident; it's from diabetic amputation. Um, glaucoma, can come from diabetes as well. So people can lose their sight, they can lose their limbs, they can lose function of the kidneys, and once these things begin to shut down, and your body cannot continue to produce insulin, for example, on its own, you need to be on an oral medication or you need to go on an injectable insulin. And so, and once again, so this leads to now your body can't produce a certain thing and people don't understand it. Insulin is the energy that your body needs for your heart to pump, among
Mhm.
other micronutrients as well. So if your body can't necessarily get glucose in and out where it needs to, the sugar, through insulin is that key, then your body is not able to produce energy and to be able to function, to breathe, to sleep, to walk, to run. And then once again, your kidneys help filter toxins out of your body. So, once your kidneys, go away, you might need to be on, a stage 3, I think 4 and 5 of kidney function losses. You'll be on dialysis. So now folks have to, for the rest of their lives, have to go to dialysis 3 times a week.
Mhm.
Or they can do it at home, of course, but it's frequent. And so I've never seen so many there dialysis center popping up on the south side of Chicago, like
Mhm.
fast food restaurants.
Right.
And it's because people are overindulging and don't understand the connection between overindulgence and food. And so you mentioned that, and some of it, is definitely determined by self, but also some of it is determined by zip code in your environment,
Sure.
having access to healthy, food through grocery stores,
Right. Right.
or being able to grow your own food,
Yeah.
or having, access to organic products. And so, or, proper, school nutrition, or access to healthcare, or not living next to a manufacturing facility that is putting a high level of pollutants in the air. So, there's definitely a cross between, individual choice, environment, and systems that are
Mhm.
set up, and then also policy that
Mhm.
also goes into that as well. I usually, when I teach class, I talk to my students about what's more powerful, individual choice of policy, and it's about half and half. But when you look at seatbelts, when I was growing up, you didn't have to wear seatbelts. Now the government says, well, we have information that shows that that wearing seatbelts, there's less death.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
we need to, protect the society from itself. The same thing with secondhand smoking. Like if you want to smoke, that's okay, but there was information that came out that there's, detrimental effects of people who were not smokers but secondhand smoke. And so I think food is sort of progressing that way, but it's not as easy to study the negative effects of food, like it is, the drug industry. But I think there needs to be more advocacy for positive food policy, and giving everyone access to healthy food, and the
Yeah.
education to be able, like consumer science,
Yeah.
home economics back in the day. Everyone knew how to cook. Everyone knew how to grow food,
Yeah.
and everyone was able to be self-sustaining. Now, people
Yeah.
would rather, order out, and
Right.
like 50% of food is eaten away from home, where it was almost non-existent when my parents were growing up. Even when I was growing up, we didn't eat away from home anywhere near that. It was a treat. We made it ate away from home like 5 to 10% of the time. And
Yeah.
so, and both my sister and I, grew up knowing how to cook and, plant fruits and vegetables.
Right. Well, there's a lot there for us to unpack. I'm going to
Yeah,
dig into this a little bit more.
yeah, yeah.
Um, let's go back to eating and hypertension or heart disease. I heard
Okay.
a doctor say once, he said that when he was in medical school, he thought that once the arteries got clogged, that it would become like concrete. There's nothing you
No,
can do other than something serious. But he said after he learned about lifestyle and nutrition and eating different, he said he discovered that you can actually reverse heart, depending on how far along it goes
absolutely.
with proper nutrition. So that's pretty huge, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. So what they're talking about is arteriosclerosis. When you start to form plaque in the arteries, and usually that's because you have a high fat diet. And so one of the things we also preach as well is, know your numbers. And so a lot of people, when someone asked me the other day, what's hyperlipidemia? It's
Mhm.
basically it's just, excess fat in your blood. So a lot goes through your blood. The glucose you need from eating food, different vitamins and minerals, um, and then also cholesterol. So when you eat a high fat diet, or too much cholesterol, your body already makes it, so you don't need to be eating a lot of it. It's going to get lodged in your arteries. And so if your arteries start off this big, now they become this big because you got plaque around it. And then the blood is still trying to go through, but then you have a smaller circumference go from this to this because now you have plaque. Now that's making your heart work harder because you still got to put the blood through your body, but now you got a smaller circumference to be able to put it through. Now your heart has to pump a lot faster to be able to do that. And you think about your engine, we don't have an engine light that goes off. If your engine light is going off, it's almost too late. You're at the hospital,
Mhm.
i.e., you have a stroke or a heart attack. And so when you think about that, you want to look at, like, when you go to the doctor, looking at your triglycerides, making sure that's within normal range, looking at your cholesterol level, making sure that's in normal range, looking at your blood pressure to make sure that's in normal range. And then depending on your insurance, one of the things I really preach, I hope people create a class for health literacy.
Yeah.
And so when you go to the doctor, you're looking at the same information you're looking at, but you're taking a lot closer look at it and asking the right questions. So if you
Right.
have high triglycerides, high cholesterol, and high blood pressure, what does that mean? That means you need to change your diet. There's some things that they can do like medication, but even if you're on medication, doesn't mean that the medication should be doing everything for you. You can still eat poorly. You should be eating that's a warning sign that wow, I'm going to the point of no return. But now not only am I taking medication, but I can continue to eat healthy and then hopefully reduce the number of medications you're taking or getting off medications completely. But
Yeah.
a cardiologist once told me I switched to African American cardiologist because I have high blood pressure, and he
Mhm.
says you're at a healthy weight, you eat clean, you don't smoke, you don't drink. So if we try all of those other lifestyle factors and they're good, and you still have high blood pressure, guess what? Then you're a candidate for medicine because we've tried everything, and
Yeah.
if you leave it unchecked, high blood pressure will take a toll on your body because it's making your body work harder than it should. If nothing else, it might decrease your lifespan
Right.
by a couple years. Yep.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that because we're not talking about eat right and forget about your doctors. We're talking about a partnership
Yes.
between a doctor and patient, and
Yes.
that's what you forged with your doctor. But look, you mentioned the 80-20 rule. I want to go back to that because I think
Yeah.
that's a good starting point for a lot of people because people think, oh, I gotta change, I gotta do everything at once. But we're
Yeah.
not saying that. I mean, heck,
Well,
Eric, if someone just makes a 25% change in the diet, they're
yes.
doing better than what they had been doing before, right?
Right. So you mentioned this is all about lifestyle. So you
Yeah,
bring up a good point. So when you look at a week, so let's say if it's quantified, you have 10 not so good habits.
yeah,
We're nobody's perfect, so all of us are going to have a few not so good habits, and you shouldn't punish yourself saying that they're bad habits. I'm a bad person, because you should have a love affair with food. It shouldn't feel like you're eating grass or you're on punishment because that's not sustainable. So when you look at 10 not so good habits, you might want to say, hey, I need to drink more water. About 60% of the body is made up of water. Water helps with cell health. It help flush the body. It helps with your hydrating your skin. It helps when you're working out to be able to have that mechanism of sweating to cool you off. So you definitely want to be able to say, if you need to drink more water, you might add water. So that might be one week. The next week you say, hey, if I'm drinking water, I can cut down on the sugar sweetened beverages. Place that with water. And so then you can say, okay, great. And then you say, okay, well, when I watch TV and I binge watch, I'm always eating a bag of chips. Well, if you're watching TV 5 days a week and you're eating 5 small bags of chips, hopefully, then you might say, okay, well, let me replace that with, either a healthier version of a snack, i.e., celery or carrots and, maybe a hummus, something that's crunchy, or there's healthier versions of chips, or it might be some trail mix. Because now you can say, okay, if I'm emotionally eating and I'm tying watching TV with snacking, well, you should have healthier snacks. And don't have, say, for instance, if you're eating chips, another small tip might be don't eat out of the bag. Pour
yeah.
some into a small container, and that's what you eat. Put the chip clip on, and that's what you eat. So instead of going through a bag in 2 days, now it might take you 2 weeks to go through a bag of chips. And trust me,
Right.
chips will last a long time. And so they're not going to go to waste in 2 weeks. If
Right,
once again
right,
you put things
right.
that with chip clip on. So yeah,
Yeah.
so it's
Mhm.
this small. Don't if you do it all at once, it's going to feel like you're punishing yourself. That's not sustainable, and you increase your chances for failure.
Yeah, lifestyle. I've discovered that a healthy nutrition plan, and I don't use the word diet. I hate that
Right,
word.
right,
Diet has die in it. You
right,
die, you
right,
die. But anyway, I heard someone else said that. I was trying to make a little fun there.
right.
But what I've discovered, Chef Eric Paul, is that a healthy dish can also be a delicious dish.
Yes,
So it doesn't necessarily have to be something like I'm suffering. It can be
yes.
something that I'm really, really enjoying. You also said something that I want to highlight again a little more. You mentioned that, our nutrition has two components. There's a personal responsibility component and there's a public policy component. And I think
Right.
you're right about that. Let's go back to personal responsibility for a moment. As I said, looking at self-determination theory, people do have the authority to make changes themselves if they want to. So
Yes,
that's a good starting point. We have the authority. Um,
but you might not have the ability.
yeah, exactly.
If you're food
Exactly.
insecure, for example,
Mhm.
so you bring up a good point. You might have the authority, but the ability, when the ability comes in, is being able to have the resources to eat a healthy diet. So for let's take somebody who's food insecure, for example. I work for the federal government, and I worked in the agency that did the SNAP and
Okay.
WIC and child nutrition. That they gave free federal food assistance to states who turn around and give it to local citizens. So if you're not able to have access to healthy food, it affects your ability to eat healthy.
Yeah.
Then you just say, hey, I need calories. So there's a choice between what I can afford and basically sustaining myself, which is why you would see somebody go and get less expensive food for $3 or $4, which can fill them,
Yeah.
versus getting, a bunch of celery and some apples, which might not be as filling, but is more nutritious. And so it's once again, there's a responsibility for society to be able to make sure that everyone has the ability to have the authority to be able to eat healthy. So
Indeed.
yeah.
Indeed. Indeed. I speaking of that, I visited Chicago
Hmm.
recently, a few months ago, and I'm not going to name the store, but I went to a national, perhaps even an international chain. I didn't know which section of Chicago. I'm not sure. Houston, not Chicago, Houston.
Okay.
And I don't know which section of town, but I just went to this big store, right? Because I
Yeah.
wanted to buy certain things. I wanted to buy fresh vegetables. Anyway,
Right.
Eric, to my astonishment, I got into the store. I looked all around. I could not find a fresh vegetables section. So I
Mm.
asked one of the clerks, I said, where are your fresh vegetables? I just couldn't believe it. She said, we don't sell any fresh vegetables
Yeah.
in
Yes.
Houston.
Yeah. Well, it depends on the store. So if you're like at a convenience store, for example, they may not have, or a corner store as we call it in Chicago, a smaller neighborhood store, usually larger chains in areas where there's a lot of economic viability, they will have fresh fruit and vegetables because that's what people want. And so fresh fruits and vegetables have to be sourced. They have to be processed, i.e., cleaned and broken up and displayed. Some vegetables have to be maintained, i.e., why you would see kind of a sprayer keeping them moist in a particular thing and letting the water drain. And then they're perishable, which means lost money for a particular store. And so with that, some people would rather go, okay, instead of fresh, they may have canned. So I always tell people fresh is best. If you can't get fresh, and then if you're at a store where let's say you don't have the ability to get on the bus, or you don't have a car and you can only walk a block or two, say for instance an older adult, and you only have the corner store to be able to get your vegetables. So there's a couple things you can get frozen. So a lot of those stores, instead of fresh, they would have frozen. So frozen is probably the next best because they're flash frozen at the peak ripeness. And so you would get those, once again, not in sauce or any other type of things. This green beans, no teriyaki sauce, no the orange glaze, is fresh green beans frozen. And then the next would be canned. Canned, of course, is going to have more sodium. So as you're putting the green beans, before you actually put them in a pot to consume them, you probably want to rinse them to get some of the sodium off. And sodium, of course, is used as a preservative. Many people who grew up on farms know that you used to salt your pork, or be able to, or you froze your thing. I used to wonder why on farms, in Mississippi, they had these big freezers, or they had a whole section of the barn that was associating the salting meat, for example. And so you have to preserve it, or it will, these fresh things will go bad. And so and then of course now people will use dehydration and other things to be able to do it. So if you can't get fresh, definitely frozen is probably the next best option. And then definitely canned. I would rather people get canned green beans than corn chips, for
Yeah.
example. Yeah.
Gotcha. Sounds good. Sounds good. I know. Did you grow up in Chicago, Eric? Or
I grew up in Chicago, but my parents were part of the Great Northern Migration. They came here for job opportunities.
okay,
So both of my parents still have relatives that live in the South. So
I see. I asked that because I grew up in the South. I grew up
okay.
in South Carolina, and one of the things that still strikes me is that when I was growing up, I mean, I was born in the early 50s.
Okay.
We just saw fresh stuff all over the place,
Right.
from sweet potatoes to collard greens to cabbage and the like. When I go back to where I grew up now, some of the fields that once grew vegetables are
Hmm.
just there. I mean, nothing is there.
Right.
So I don't know. I mean, are there people, as far as you know, are there individuals who are trying to organize and educate the current generation about growing fresh vegetables and how to preserve them and the like?
So it's definitely a diminishing art. So I think when, right around the start of the 20th century, right around, 1900, 1910, there was a large, significant population of black sharecroppers.
Mhm.
And they not only grew their food, they might have sold their food or, bartered their food amongst family members or people in the community, but they used that to sustain themselves. They had, chickens, they had hogs, they had cow, maybe not as many cows, but they might have one or two, or they had a deal with a family member who raised cows, kind of the bigger uh, animals that required a lot more resources. But everybody grew, greens and corn and green beans and other vegetables. Some people had fruit trees. And so you learn that that was passed down from generation to generation. But once again, there was a lot of consumer science that happened. That's why we have historically black colleges like North Carolina A&T, Alabama A&M, because agriculture was such a big part of community because you could be self-sustaining. You didn't need to be able to use that part of your means to be able to eat because at least you had that biological need taken care of. So as consumer science went away, as there was a migration from people from the South going into urban centers, into cities, as land became more scarce, the highest and best use for land in a major city is not a farm, is going to be to put up a condo or a high rise. And so, but there is a resurgence. Matter of fact, I just saw something from the the ghetto gardener, I think out of LA, who got policy for them to be able to use curbs to be able to grow food in urban setting in a large metropolitan city. So there is a movement of people to be able to take back the foodways and to teach younger generations like, hey, there's a beauty in growing your own food and being one with the environment. And I found this through health education that if a kid gets dirty, puts their hand in soil and grows something and eat it, there's a better connection. They want
Yeah,
to indulge in something that they seen and grew to life. It started as a seed, it
yeah,
grew into a plant, and they're very some a lot of them hate to see the tomato go, but it's definitely a better connection with the earth
yeah,
and their bodies if you get more into agriculture. So I
yeah.
think the migration from the south, even though it created more job opportunities, we
Mhm.
lost some of those traditional ways, which I think negatively affected our health outcomes
Yeah.
as we progress into a more industrial society. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Hey, look, I know you've talked about food as medicine. I've heard others talk about food as medicine, but this really boils down to making smart, as you've once put it, smart choices about eating, right?
Right.
Food, medicine, smart choices. Can you tell us about smart choices a little more about, in fact, let me change it a little bit here
Yep.
because I've heard you talk about smart goals and you
Yep.
tie them to nutrition. So
Yep.
can you wrap all of that up into a bow for me? Smart goals, yeah,
Yeah.
nutrition. Yeah.
Yeah. So for people who aren't familiar with the acronym, it's specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time bound. So to give you an example, some people say I want to lose weight.
Mhm.
Okay, that's a goal, but it doesn't have teeth. And so you want to say, how much weight do you want to lose? And okay, I want to lose, let's say 6 pounds, and I want to lose it in 3 months. Okay. Now you want to say, is it measurable? Yep. I'm losing 6 pounds in 3 months. So that's 2 pounds a month. Is it attainable? Well, healthy weight loss is maybe a pound a week, a pound and a half a week. And so that might equate to 12 pounds. So I'll say, okay, well, great. If I'm just starting to work out again or I'm haven't, been eating well for one, you know, 12 is about the average for someone who's doing it completely right and maybe having support. So I'm cutting that in half. So that's attainable. And then relevant would be things related to that. You're cutting your calories, you're working out more. Now you eating things like I don't know, watching TV might not be relevant. Say, hey, I'm gonna cut my TV watching, but is that really, if you're replacing TV watching with exercise, that would be relevant because that can help with the weight loss goal. And then, and once again, and then time bound is the 3 months. So that's the SMART goals. You want to set up all your goals into that particular thing. So now you can attack it, you can measure it, and you can measure your progress. Then once again, if you said I'm gonna lose 50 pounds in 3 months, I might not say that's not attainable. So the A in that equation is not attainable. And so when you look at some simple nuggets, people should become more conscious of the calories that they're eating. So there's a simple formula. It depends on your height, weight, age, gender, activity level, and so forth. There's a formula, and people use MyFitnessPal, they use Fitbit or whatever to be able to calculate the number of calories. For me, it's about 3,600 calories. I exercise about 4 times a week. I'm 6'2", 245. I'm 53 years old. I'm a male, identify as a male. And so that's going to tell me how many calories. Now, if I eat more than 3,600, it's going to turn into fat. So if I ate 4,000 or 4,600, those extra 1,000 calories are going to add pounds on a weekly basis.
Mhm.
So, and then if you ate an extra 200 or 300, it'll slowly add the weight. And so you can either lose weight by doing calorie reductions. Instead of 3,600, I do 3,000, or you can ramp up your exercise activity to burn more calories, or you can do both. Most people would suggest that you do both, not only reduce your calories or at least maintain your calories, but dial up your workout, because as you increase muscle mass, your body becomes more metabolically active. A lot of people think I'm going to become like Angela Bassett or Arnold Schwarzenegger. Those folks work very hard to do that. And so you should do some strength training. Should do some flexibility training like yoga, Pilates. If you can, you should do swimming, which is a complete body workout. If you can't do that, you can walk, you can run. There's a lot of things you can do just to get active. At least 10 minutes a day and 10-minute bouts. It doesn't need to be an hour. It doesn't need to be an hour and a half. You need to spend 2 hours in the gym. And so with that, once you know your calories, then you have to start looking at your portions. A lot of people I talk to sometimes say, I eat all my calories in one meal. Your body's like a gas tank. If you put too much gas in, it's going to run out. The running out of the gas is your body storing fat. So you eat in smaller chunks. So your body goes through the digestive process, is using all the calories that you're consuming, and it's not running over, it's not taking the excess and storing the fat. That's why they say you eat 3 meals, 5 or 6 meals, you break it up so your body only has the energy it needs in that time. Once every 3 or 4 hours, your body goes through the cycle. You should be regular, meaning you should be going to the bathroom, both number one, urination, and number two, excretion of feces. You should be doing that at least, after every meal a couple times a day. And so calories in, calories out, understand what that is. Being conscious, what they call mindful eating, of the calories you put in the body. You should not be eating all your calories in 1 meal or 2 meals, or eating to what they call satiety, where you feel lethargic because you've eaten too much.
Yeah.
And now your body is trying to figure out what to do with all that energy.
Uh,
And then the other thing is quality ingredients, quality preparation methods, fresh fruits and vegetables, whole grains, lean protein, healthy fats. And when we talk about preparation methods, steaming, roasting, sauteing. Once again, we know that people go into deep fry foods every now and then, but that probably should be lower on the spectrum as far as preparation methods. And so some of these tenets is like, are the rules of thumb, understanding your calorie needs, making sure you don't exceed that, but also making sure you don't underexceed it, because then you can slow your metabolism down and you can lose muscle mass and so forth. Portion control is huge, and no pun intended, in states, because we overserve people because they feel they're getting value for their money. But portion control will get you in trouble. Healthy preparation methods and healthy ingredients, all of those tenets are very important. And so those are the things when you talk about lifestyle, just tweaking each of those, learning a little bit more about your body. Most of us spend 17 years going to school, another 4 years going to college, some go get a master's degree, spend very little time. We're not even spending 17 hours or 17 weeks learning how our body functions and what should be going in it, what I should be doing to maintain it. So we have to become better stewards of our vessel.
That's for sure. Well, look, I want to talk about health heroes in a moment, but I have
Yep.
one other question to ask
Yes.
you about nutrition. What's your view on supplementation?
So you should definitely try to get 100% of your nutrients, both macro and micro. And when I say macro, carbohydrates, fats, and proteins, and micro, vitamins and minerals. And so from food.
Yeah.
Um, that's tough to do every day, all day. And so even me, I take a one a day. So when you talk about supplements, it's not regulated like the drug industry, meaning that every particular company does not go through rigorous testing to say what they're promising they do is what they actually do. So then we talk about the bioavailability of supplements. So and nutrition is different. Um, it's not going to behave the same way in everyone's body. So if you take a particular vitamin and it's 1,000 milligrams of magnesium, for example, my father is going to extract a certain amount of milligrams than I extract. So in theory, if he has a healthier gut than me and he's in need of that particular mineral, and then he's taking other things and people, these minerals sometimes need each other to be able to work together to say, I can't put this mineral in your body unless you have this other mineral as well. So that's why I say, I personally recommend, this is my opinion, that people take a kind of a multivitamin, just as an insurance. When I was vegan, for example, I took B12 and I took flaxseed, omega 3, omega 6 fatty acids to make sure I was getting the fat. Because
Mhm.
people say I don't need fat in my diet. Yes, you do. There's fat soluble vitamins, A, D, E, and K. So
Yeah.
you need fat to be able to digest those. So the body is a beautiful thing, but once again, as you learn about it, you need this cadre of vitamins and minerals for them to be able to work together in your body. Not too much. You don't need the mega dose on vitamin C if you got a cold, but at the same time, if you're having issues with bone health, for example, they might prescribe vitamin D, for example, because
Right.
your body is not getting enough of it or you're not eating enough of it. So I'm a big fan of supplements, but I would probably say, as you talked about with the health team,
Yeah.
talk to your primary care physician to see where you're deficient. Once again, knowledge is power.
Yeah.
Make data-driven decisions, even on your own body. See where you're deficient. Ask for a test to see where you're deficient,
That's great.
and then if you're deficient, see if you can address that with diet,
Yeah.
adding some things to your diet. And if it continues to be a struggle, you may need to add supplementation.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, and that's why education is so important.
Yeah.
And, one's blood work, I mean, that tells
Yes.
you a lot, including
Yes.
where you are with vitamin D,
Yeah.
vitamin B12, and other
Yeah.
things.
Yep.
So it's huge. Okay, so I want to switch gears. And I'm going to talk about, well, we're not switching gears, but
Yeah.
I'm going to continue on. I'm going to talk about health heroes. But let me tell you now, Eric, I got to bring you back
Okay.
because we need more time to dig into childhood health literacy,
Yep.
health heroes, what your goals are. But just kind of open the door for us now. What is health heroes? What is that about?
So health heroes kind of came about when I was getting my graduate degree, my master's degree in nutrition at the University of North Chicago, probably around 2010. And what I began to find is, they had a statistic out there that 80% of overweight and obese children grow up to be overweight or obese adults. So that's 80%. So if you need to change behaviors early, when I thought about myself, is my mom taught me how to cook. We were doing smoothies and eating fresh fruits and vegetables early, and I was working out. So when I looked at how I became a health advocate, it was because I started early and my parents supported that. And so in order to change behavior, I recommend that you start very early. And for example, there's been studies that say, talk about the efficacy of breastfeeding and, switching babies to formula too soon, or, switching, solid foods. And so I've decided to do early. So when I said, okay, how do I reach the younger population? I'm not an athlete, a professional athlete, of course.
Mhm.
I'm not a music entertainer. And so, right around that time, superhero movies really began to be popular. So I says, wow. And then I started studying educational psychology. And, when you look at peer-based learning, when you look at role modeling, is a very powerful thing when kids see themselves doing a healthy behavior. So I said, wow, when I looked at the box office success of superheroes, and I grew up with comic books, so no big thing. And I said, what if I created characters who are between the ages of 9 and 13? So this is the age when you look at social cognitive theory that children begin to understand the consequences of their action. If I drink too much soda, it could affect my hair and it could affect, pimples growing, and it could make me be overweight, or it could cause cavities. So now, because they're able to make those decisions, let me create characters between the ages of 9 and 13. I'm the main character called H, and I empower them to be able to
Mhm.
solve problems. I don't solve all their problems. I might give them a little guidance. And this is kind of what we call positive youth development. Instead of working on children, you work with children and you empower them, and use their ability to make some decisions, and you kind of cascade it. They might learn this basic thing and you build on it, build on it, and build on it until they have enough knowledge to be able to put it all together. And it's not an abstract thing anymore because they sequentially learn. Like, you don't start off with algebra, you start off with addition, then you
Right.
go to multiplication, then you go to division. And so, same way that you teach kids other things, I want to teach them how to process health information and make it easier, but do it through entertainment. And now we use that, and then visual narrative for kids who might not be as well versed, like English as a second language. You can use the power of storytelling, visuals, and language to be able to tie it all together to be able to teach kids how to process health information um,
Yeah.
a lot better. So that's
Yeah.
kind of how Health Heroes came about, and that's kind of it in a nutshell.
Okay, that's great. That's great. But we got to delve into that because you've said more. I think you've said that when children that there are positive results of children getting involved with childhood literacy, health heroes, and the like. I think you said that they read better, they comprehend better, they retain more, those kinds of things. So we got to get you back. We got to get you back.
Absolutely, yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah. Maybe
Yeah,
maybe in
welcome back to.
2023. Okay, we have to nail it down, but at least
All
in 2023.
right, great, great, great,
Yeah,
great.
yeah.
Yeah.
Eric, we've covered a lot, but is there anything else that you care to share with us now that I haven't asked you?
I, I would, put a call out to action. I'm involved in 100 Black Men in Chicago. I'm co-chair of the Health and Wellness Committee. I'm involved in Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated. Do a lot with health and wellness. I just shook a brother's hand at the 100 Black Men in Chicago College Scholarship Fair last weekend. Got an email during the week that he's no longer with us.
Oh,
That brother was in his early 50s. I've had brothers from high school. I went to all boy, all black high school who are no longer with us. You walk around, you may feel fine, or you might not feel fine. Some people not sleeping well, some people have headaches, some people, the bones ache. We have to do, and not only individually, but helping the fellow man or woman, keeping them accountable. We're doing a better job at prevention.
yeah.
Going to getting checked up, and knowing what the numbers mean is one thing to get the numbers, but what do these numbers mean, and how can you affect them in a positive way? What do
Yeah.
you need to do with these numbers to manage them? And then if you're not managing correctly, a dietary intervention, sometimes working with a dietitian or expert in nutrition, or you may need medication for, either a short time or you may need it for a lifetime. But we cannot continue to go unchecked with these particular things, because they will happen. You will get older. Your body will become less functional. Some people do a job of keeping it as functional as possible, giving the age that they're at. I.e., my father, for example, he's 80 and he goes to the hospital less than I do. But he recently had to go get his prostate removed, and which is good. And I said, well, hey, is it cancerous? And he's like, no. And he said, well, what's a PSA test? And this is my father. You would think that he would be telling me, but because I took these classes and I go through it myself, I'm a little bit more health literate than he's in, and really explain it to him, because unfortunately sometimes in the healthcare community they only got 15 minutes. Things are rushed, and there's not enough time. So we need to definitely have a community based approach of saying, those who are a lot more health literate or a little bit more diligent about their health, need to reach back and help provide support, communal support to those who are not. Encourage a brother to go get prostate screening, or work with your church to, get blood pressure exams, or, this, that, and the other. So we need a better job, not just individual, but, community, because we want to keep people around as long as possible, because we got a lot of work to do, a lot of good work to do. And if you're not here to do it, like that brother was part of the 100 Black Men in Chicago, doing great mentoring work, but he's no longer here. I'm sure his legacy will live on. But in my opinion, I don't know exactly what happened. It seemed like it might have been based on the email's natural causes, of course. But some of these things definitely could be prevented. As I read these emails over the last couple of years: heart attack, stroke, aneurysm, kidney disease. So some of these things could be prevented if we make the investment in ourselves, and if we make collectively the investment in our community. Education and health are two big things that we definitely need to do as we continue to seek to get our due place in society.
Indeed, indeed. Well, very good, Eric. I really enjoyed our conversation
Yeah.
today. Thank you so much for being with us.
You're most welcome, and I thank you for the invite, and I look forward to the next invitation to come back in 2023.
Okay, great. A reminder to our viewers and listeners, your support matters. Check out our sponsor wherever you see the description of this program. You've been listening to or watching the Possibility Action Network. Our guest today has been Chef Eric Paul Meredith. I'm your host, Stephen Middleton. Until next time, good day